Welcome back to the discussion Cybersecurity Compliance and Risk Management, sponsored by HID Global on Federal News Network. My guest today is Yves Massard, Product Marketing Director for Identity Access Management Solutions at HID Global. I'm your moderator, John Thomas Flynn. Yves, before we took a break, we were talking about mobility and how that added to the complexity of the issue of compliance with security, et cetera, et cetera. Let's move along to access controls. I know that the federal government has taken the lead on this. What are some of the similar levels of maturity that state and local governments are adopting, similar to what the federal government's done?
Yeah, it very depends on the organization. A lot of the technology that the U.S. federal government has deployed can also be reused by the state and local agencies. And in fact, the industry has been taking a lot of the lesson learned and taking advantage of cloud technology to be able to repackage that in a way that's a lot easier for state and even local organizations to be able to take advantage of all those capabilities and provide a level of security that's very similar to what the federal government has, but really for a fraction of the cost, because a lot of the cost also comes around the processes, and some of the federal government processes due to the size of the federal government may be a little bit prohibitive. But the good news is that the local and state organization, they don't have to abide by that. Actually, a lot of it doesn't even apply to them. And so they can take advantage of the technology without having to worry about all the red tape. And what that means is that they can benefit from it for really a smaller fraction of the cost than what the federal government pays for.
Okay, that's interesting. I was curious. I know there's been a number of bills passed in Congress, or at least raised in Congress, about the issue of funds for cybersecurity in state and local government, which I think is going to happen. But in the meantime, you're saying that there's actually all the investment that the Fed's made, and I believe it's in the area of just under $20 billion a year of the IT budget spending is for cybersecurity. That can be leveraged for state and local. Any examples of that you're familiar with?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for example, the federal government has deployed the PIF card, which provide a secure identity to employees and contractors. All that infrastructure that there can be also used by local and state government. There's several providers that provide that as a cloud service, so that the local or state government doesn't have to worry about all the infrastructure. They can just connect that to their infrastructure, and they can leverage that secure identity immediately. Essentially, they might not get some of the federation with the federal government if they don't want to spend too much, but they can go all the way to, if they want, having that federation in terms of that secure identity being recognized by the federal government. But if they're just deploying internally, they can just deploy that infrastructure for them and immediately shore up their cybersecurity compared to many are still using username password, right? Mm-hmm. So that's actually a huge break from where they are today.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we always talk about the state and local government. They're a little bit afraid of leading edge technologies, and they're scared to death of bleeding edge technology. Yeah. So it's nice that they can look at the federal government, see what's worse, what's best practices, et cetera.
Yeah, and that infrastructure really started almost 20 years ago with the DoD. It became more widespread around 2008, 2009. So we're talking about something that's mature already. It's not bleeding edge. That's something that's been deployed to more than 5 million active users. So it's quite proven.
Mm-hmm. I know that back when I was CIO in Massachusetts and California, there was the beginnings of what we saw to citizen access to government. Became a big deal. It's even bigger now. I mean, it's in the top 10 list of the NACIO's top 10 priorities every year for the last 4 or 5 years is digital government, and that certainly involves this whole issue. But I remember back in the early days, you'd get like the Department of Motor Vehicles that said, okay, we want to allow them to register their car online. And it was great. People would go in and do that. Well, unfortunately, about the same time, the welfare agencies said, well, we'd like to register people for welfare eligibility online. So that went all the way down the list with agency after agency developing their own protocols. That's a big mess. How does this get straightened out?
Yeah, so actually the industry also has changed a lot in that area, and there's open standards that are out there that lets application connect to an identity provider, so that you can set up one identity provider that multiple application, the DMV, the state franchise board, name it, can then connect to that. And so instead of each of those agencies or department having to build up their IAM for citizen, they can rely instead on federation and having that centralized at the state level, could be even across states, depending on what all those organizations, they want to work together or
that'll
not.
Be
right?
the day. But
yes.
still,
it's possible.
It can be a stretch goal. Let's
yes,
put it that way.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, because I've always said, why are there 50 Department of Motor Vehicle applications around the country struggling? Let's take a really good one and use it from multiple states. So I know that there's been a big push lately for identity and access management initiatives in state and local government. Speaking of NASCIO's top 10, it was in NASCIO's top 10 last year. So how do you see what's the latest and best practices in terms of states that are actually looking to an enterprise IAM solution?
Yeah, so the latest is Zero Trust. It's something that started a few years back and is really starting to gain steam. A lot of it is also around what's changing in the market. So over the last 10 years, mobility has really exploded, and also cloud application has really exploded. What that means for IT organization is that the old approach of moats, firewall that's protecting you, and then once you're inside, you have access to your application. Well, that doesn't work anymore, because your application might be outside your network, it might be a cloud apps. And your user might also be outside your network. They might be on a mobile device, traveling for wherever they need to go. Or they might be working from home, as we said earlier, because of the coronavirus. Maybe they need to telework, right? Mm-hmm. And so the idea with Zero Trust is going away from having that castle type of approach with the firewall, and instead making sure that every point that you're accessing something, whether it's data or application, that you make sure that this is the right person that's accessing that. So that's a big change in terms of the IAM space. It's been up and coming for quite a few years, and it's really gaining steam.
Yeah. Let's take a little break right now. My guest today is Yves Massard, Product Marketing Director for Identity and Access Management Solutions at HID Global. I'm your moderator, John Thomas Flynn, on the discussion of cybersecurity, compliance, and risk management, sponsored by HID Global on Federal News Network.